Just make sure your hat looks good. Okay, so topic being how to manage externals, or what that phrase even means, because we see it said all of the time. Who wants to take lead on what that even fucking means these days? Not Beck.
Okay, so I think like addressing things like what are we looking at when we say externals? So like the big things like fatigue, nutrition, and rest. Would everyone agree those are the things that we would say?
Basically every element outside of your training that could impact your training.
Yeah. But we see those, I guess those are the ones that I get discussed quite a lot with my athletes that come up the most.
Do we think that athletes actually have a fair representation of what externals means these days? Because it's probably a phrase used the most often now. Well, apart from fatigued singles, it's either that or it's externals.
I don't think I talk about externals in terms of the word external. I'll be more specific. I will talk about their sleep, their steps, their external stress. Like, I'll make sure it's not just, well, how are your externals? Because that's pretty vague. Because then they might not know what I'm talking about.
As like a female, and I say this because it's just a nice way of like justifying the fact that I've usually got like 5 different things that are going on at the same time: stress, sleep, food. I just feel like externals are a nice way to wrap all of your issues into like one nice word that means just I haven't had a vegetable, I haven't had 8 hours sleep, and I haven't picked my RPEs correctly.
Can I just point out the absolute rife sexism to think that men don't eat vegetables?
No, because you can also go down the monthly cycle, because
what Lucy's saying is actually you guys are really good at eating your vegetables and we are just shit.
But so what I would say is, like, so for instance, the monthly cycle where someone is in that is not an external. Like, that's very much an internal influence of something that we track and we'd probably have predicted and we're aware of within our data collection. So like we try to make sure it falls on the right week. We in the sense of like the programming falls around that where possible to control. External factors, like one of the things I come across is that people either give way too much or way too little credit to externals, and there's a real hype or pride taken about the fact of like, haha, fuck my externals, versus being like, my externals are horrific because I work a job like everyone else. And so I think people have a really poor understanding of what factors are actually relevant. So like, for instance, Beck, if someone said to you they've got really big external factors that they're concerned about, what are the assumptions of the things you think fall under that umbrella?
Big externals, maybe so based on experience, it could be like the things that I see as legitimately big external factors that are going to affect you is like changing jobs, getting a new job, like any stresses at work. So I've had people that are rising the rank in their industry, and it's like, I've gone from pot wash and now I'm the manager of the store, and it's like, yeah, that's a lot more stress for you to deal with right now. Or it'd be like, I just got evicted. I'm like, what? Yeah, I don't have a house anymore. Yeah, that's probably quite strenuous,
Life-changing situations, basically.
Yeah, like life-changing situations.
Because I think that's almost something that people don't frame properly as externals, where most often we talk about externals, people assume sleep, nutrition, hydration, and so on. And these are, again, factors very easy to influence. If someone's like, I slept like shit, I'm like, okay, so have we put anything in place with that? Or how are we treating our bedtime? And then there's the externals like that where you go, I'm now fucking homeless. Or it's like, there's very little as a coach you are now able to influence that.
No, but you could maybe manage their expectations in training, because I've had before now people's training drop off and they're like, I don't get it, what's going on? I'm like, so what's happening outside of training? Like, well, I just started working night shifts 2 weeks ago. I'm like, that'll be why you went from being a student to working night shifts. Like, it's probably why your training's not been going so well.
Same sort of thing you see with people who are like, they've got a newborn and they're like, yeah. So like, I'm like, or I've got single parents who are like, my training's fucking terrible at the end of the week. I don't know why, but I have the kids at the weekend and that's when I train. And being like, well, that's a big fucking factor. So in terms of like the hierarchy of things that we would focus on, let's say that someone says that they've got their ducks in a row and there are no externals. What are the things that we think would be the primary bits we would still chase on and check that are actually controlled? Because someone saying my externals are fine, and it turns out down the line they're only having sub 5 hours sleep, is that the first thing we would have looked at in the first place?
I was going to jump in and say, like, understanding like what is actually external, so the things that we can review, but also seeing them going on their stories, I'm so tired all the time, but they're not filling in like their fatigue RPEs, and they're not reporting back on check-ins that actually their training is absolutely exhausting them and stuff like that. So it could be very something much that's tied to the training and externals. So checking in and saying, actually, is your training optimal around your lifestyle right now? Because if you're, you know, if you've got externals or not, is the training still burning you out?
And I think this is one of the things that athletes kind of get wrong quite frequently, of the assumption that relevant work has to look the same all of the time. Like when that external stress is pretty substantial, the intensity of your training can reduce, still give you very good results. But it's, we use the phrase like what is optimal training, being like in certain conditions, whether that's you've got a massive life change, work has substantially changed, your sleep pattern can't be the same. The constructive training probably doesn't look the same way it did. That intensity probably has to drop down. The length of session probably has to drop down. The volume might have to drop down. And that is still okay. Like I think we spoke before about, I used Amelia as an example, who when she was starting uni, we shifted her pretty immediately to 3 days a week training, which was a fairly large drop off in total tonnage. But the training itself did as well, if not better. Fucking Ryan, you've just had the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how have you found it?
Well, yeah, we kind of downplay it a little bit as well. We have all these things going on, and you either have one or two mindsets. Like for me, it was more of a, oh, I can push through it, it's fine. But I had like started a new business, and there's a bunch of other things going on. And I don't think you realize just how much is going on until you talk to someone else, which I feel like a lot of people don't do. Or if they're a young person, that they feel like a 10K step is extremely fatiguing. So I think it's a bit of education on that standpoint.
I think the entire thing, a lot of times we say about accountability of an athlete, but also the stuff that they think they have to break through. Like how many athletes really are doing this full time? Agatha, and that might be it. Who has also just gone to 7 days a week SBD. We can talk about that another time. Because that's anyway, but the point being, like most people have, like we say, it's just lifting weights, but people have entire lifestyles that they have to accommodate. Training accommodates for those things, and training does kind of have to move down the chain of events. But if someone had shit, let's say shit sleep, shit hydration, shit nutrition, let's say you had to pick one, where's our priority sit? Oh.
Nutrition, hydration.
I'd say
Oh,
sleep.
we're really not.
Nutrition.
Well, isn't that personal though? Because if I don't sleep, I'm worse, but I could train on an empty stomach and I could absolutely be dehydrated.
But if we put it in the perspective of if you don't have water for how long, or if you don't have any food for how long, what's going to be the killer one first? Like hydration is probably the most important, because that will facilitate mood and stuff like that. And then I would say it's sleep and nutrition.
So I would have gone sleep first, under the principle that bad sleep hinders recovery to quite a high end, hinders the mental state to the highest one out of all of those. So hydration you'll notice later on. You'll notice on performance recovery to some extent, but the actual performance within every single session I think will be faster on poor consistent sleep. Fatigue would be worse, risk of injury would increase. Poor nutrition would impact recovery, but we can accommodate that quite easily within the training itself. I haven't had an athlete, I'll say, who said they've got shit hydration in a very long time. So I actually don't know how bad that would get.
I think it could be the biggest impact in, like, people can still function 2 to 3 hours a week, or 2 to 3 hours like each night. But if you take away water fully, like you're done for, aren't you?
You can't take one away in its entirety and the other way one away a bit.
I think it's easier to say.
Sorry.
Go on,
I think it's easier to sort of say, I need you to drink a bit more than sleep a bit more if they're struggling to sleep. Like, is better nutrition, better hydration going to help them sleep better? I don't know.
I think it's like Lucy said, it's really important, like to the person as well. I would have gone with sleep, but that's based on me personally, because when I don't sleep, everything else goes to shit. I won't bother to plan my food because I'm tired. I will rush my training because I'm tired. I will forget things because I'm tired. So personally for me, it's going to be sleep, because everything else will just die if I don't sleep properly.
So rather than the hierarchy of which one we think is the most important, different question. If an athlete is struggling with those factors, how much of it would you lead to conversation of where you're struggling versus what immediate changes do people make, or do they wait to see the impact? So if someone's like newborn struggling with sleep, do you jump on programming changes quick, or do you wait to see?
I'd probably wait to see, because I don't know what exactly to change immediately. Well, I could probably work it out if something starts going wrong.
Same thing for nutrition, hydration?
No, nutrition hydration, there is like established baselines from research that is, you must drink this much roughly to be healthy. You must eat this much roughly to perform at your best. You must sleep this much roughly, right? So if I just get you in those ranges, like that can be done versus the other thing that you said. I don't remember.
Go on, Ryan.
I think variables are controlled as well. If you have a newborn baby, it's going to be hard to tell them to get more sleep. So I would put more focus on other areas, personally.
Let's say someone's struggling to eat and they're hitting they're in a calorie deficit. They're trying to hit maintenance, but they're doing a poor job. And we're seeing body weight reduce, and whatever parameters we start putting in place, they're still living in that calorie deficit initially. What are the first things you would start changing within training?
Well, probably volume.
Yeah, intensity.
I think could look at this from different angles. So if they're in a calorie deficit, and how much is their mood affecting their ability to hit a certain calorie intake, and then address that first rather than sort of address the training. But in the short term training, you could reduce volume as well.
So I think, for instance, for me, the first things that take a knock will be the volume on working sets, and then something in accessories. If we had anything that's fluff, where I'm like, this is beyond non-constructive now. Like, there's nothing that's going to. Someone's doing fucking lateral raises while they're in a calorie deficit. There's very little that's being sustained out of that. But if it's poor sleep and things, I think that's the bit where my consideration will be. The first thing I would change straight away is just what the block pattern was going to be. So let's say that we were assuming a rate of intensity growth through that block. I might repeat that intensity on the second week and be like, I'm not going to see any change. But if I see positive trend or repeat trend, golden, we're in the same sort of place. But if I'm seeing a downward trend, I now know within safe parameters that we can start to bring that volume down, because we're going to need to, without the risk of increasing the intensity first and then seeing what that impact's going to look like. Anyone disagree with that? Someone tell me I'm dumb. Not you, Ben.
No, that's kind of where I was going with. I would want to measure the impact of the external before making a change. So you just say, just give an example there of, right, we've had this external happen, let's repeat. This person's had a new baby, let's repeat their first week of training. Is it the same? Okay, we could probably continue with this much volume, maybe. If it's like a downturn, like you say, okay, let's reduce some things. That's the way of measuring the response and making a change from it. Because if you just immediately made a change, you didn't necessarily know that you had to.
And you don't know the responses based off of the external that they had or the changes that you've just made. What externals do we think people get wrong? So we're obviously saying these are substantial ones. Fuck all sleep, terrible nutrition, and so on. Other things that you find people come to you being like, this external is really freaking me out, and you're like, I think you're actually okay. Like, obviously you don't say that, but are there things we have people raise where you're like, maybe we can keep going, maybe this, and they almost are talking themselves into a negative outcome?
I find it like when they get pains, like weird and random pains, like my quad hurts today, so I can't squat, or my hips hurting, so I don't want to deadlift. Like, obviously you believe them. Like, I don't ever expect anyone to tell me something that they're making up, but at what point are you like train through it, or okay, give it a rest, skip this week, come back to it? Like, how do you deal with that?
I think that one, like the speed at which someone wants to either cut losses and call it a day, as opposed to like, let's find out. So for instance, like say someone's saying my hip feels just a bit tight today, and being like, well, you haven't got to the gym yet, you haven't done any warm-up stuff. Like maybe we take the opportunity to start seeing how you feel. 9 times out of 10, by the time they're doing any sort of squats, they feel fantastic, and they're like, oh yeah, it's nothing, it's not an issue. I think we become quite fragile, especially people who've gotten to an intermediate level. Beginners not so bad, where they're like, I feel fine, I'm going to be sprightly and youthful till I die. And then there are people who are like, have been in the game for a good amount of time, where they're like, earlier on I like high-fived a friend and my forearm feels weird, so I think I should probably not bench for a week. Like I think people start to get a little bit princessy and feel like they're made of glass because they're so self-aware of what their body feels like all the time.
I think something I've realized recently is that the experiences and the background that some of us have in training, whether it be different sports or this, and going through realizing that training under pain in some levels fine, or we understand our bodies to a point where it's like, this pain's okay, oh, that pain's not okay. Like this could be most people's first sport, so they've only experience they've had a pain's like they stood up too fast or something, or like they stubbed their toe, right? They don't know that it's okay to go through this. Like, oh, my legs really hurt after squats. Like, is that okay? Is that normal? Should I take 3 days off? I'm like, no, it's probably just natural. Like, you just haven't experienced it before. So that's why their reaction is quite panicked and like, oh, I must stop this. Pain equals bad. Like, it's the education of the pain theory is forever complex and always changing, but still people don't know that, and we forget they don't know that.
And as you like very much point on there, like, so for instance, if someone comes from a rugby background, that fucker does not care if they hurt. They're like, well, I'm used to like my collarbone hanging off, so like bench feels fine, my shoulder's just a bit niggly, they're okay. But the people who have not done a sport previously and don't realize that we are trying to force adaptation to a body that does not want to do that, which is why you have to create the movement patterns that your body's trying to compensate for and avoid, like it's going to cause stress, and some discomfort is not only going to be somewhat frequent but kind of expected within the process. And people can be somewhat hypochondriac about it because you start to become more physically aware over and over. You start to know what it feels like to use your quads, you know what it feels like to load your hamstrings, and then as soon as you feel your hamstring, you're like, fuck, should I feel that? And I think that one, when we're talking about externals, also relates to people like, let's say they've had a lot of travel or something, they've sat down for ages and they're like, my hip flexors just feel really tight, and like they've just been shortened for a length of time, and you're just aware you can feel them. Like sometimes people's awareness can be an absolute downfall to what they actually think they can do.
There's a lot on social media about like listening to your body, and I think some people take it to the extreme. Like if they've got a cold, they don't want to go to the gym, but I'm like, no, you're probably going to be okay. Your muscles are probably going to be okay. You just got a bit of a sniffy nose. But I guess there's a lot of, I don't know, glamorization on rest days, because I think, yes, some people might overtrain, but then, yeah, if you're in this sport, you probably should be sticking to your program if you can get through your program.
What's the likelihood of overtraining? Like what overtraining actually is? I'm back immediately laughing. Overtraining is so fucking hard. Like to actually get to a point that your body cannot recover, you have to be doing like, just point blank now, I'll say verging on objectively, no powerlifter is overtraining. Like I've not met one yet.
What about
Agatha? Recovering. She's fine.
Yeah, not even her. She's thriving. But if you can see other sports, like we use the rugby example, right? The professional level, which is where people want to take powerlifting, they want to make it professional, right? They are in a training. They're going to training, right? They are doing a morning session. They are doing an afternoon session. They're training 3-4 times a day for maybe like 5 days, right? And then you think you're overtraining doing 3 times a week SBD.
And only literally lifting for a matter of minutes out of that session.
Yeah, they'll be training for 6 hours. for 5 days. And sure, like they'll have designated like rest, fucking like recovery sessions, their nutrition's top notch, their sleep's top notch, everything's provided for them. But that's why it's not overtraining. You just need to go to bed, eat your vegetables, and sleep. Right?
I'd also think the bit that you just mentioned, Alice, like there's always a cycle of things, which is there'll be the cycle of let's go hard, work, fucking beast mode, no rest days, whatever. And then there's the cycle in retaliation of love yourself, look after your body, listen to your body. I think the notion, listen to your body, by people who do not understand their body is just a scope of idiocy. You cannot listen to a thing that you don't even know how to communicate with. Like, if I'll know which pain is a real pain because a decade of lifting things. But the person who's like, I'm 3 months in, I'm listening to my body. I'm like, you don't know shit about your body yet. Like, in what world should you be having a conversation with your body? Listen to your program.
I think on the same sort of token as like what Alice was saying as well, people become very easily defeated. And I don't want to speak on anyone's experience because, you know, I don't know. But people will just say, oh, I had a bit of a stressful experience, or oh, I'm feeling a little bit anxious today, and will almost be like, okay, I'm going to write the session off because they're always in pursuit of that perfect session. So the conditions are not perfect today, therefore I am not going to go. And like, I think it's real experience that builds up mental fortitude to go and have a good session on that imperfect day, because a lot of my sessions, really good sessions, have been on imperfect days when I've been really stressed, I've been really sad, I've been hyper anxious, I've almost felt sick, I've had a migraine, and I have gone into that environment, and it is fixed everything, because I know that training does that for me. And I think some people will just literally just be like, I can't because it's not perfect.
There will be a defense mechanism for people to now feel somewhat attacked by the principle of being told that they're okay and that they feel things that aren't completely true. But I think it's important that, like, one of the fundamental things of successful athletes, and one of the things that's in literature and it's spoken about by sports psychologists, I had a call with one today, and talking about like one of the underlying features of successful athletes is mental toughness. It's one of the biggest like determining factors. And like the fragility mindset of it's not perfect, and so fucking, again, I'll go back to rugby of how many training days in the rain, in mud, forgot your fucking boots, do it in your socks, no one cares. Like, the mental toughness that people build in other sports, whereas powerlifting, I think, has gotten a little bit dainty at times.
Well, it's the realization that a lot of people don't know what fatigue feels like or should feel like. You get a little bit of fatigue, like, if anything, and they go, oh, that's it, that's me done. And I'm like, you've done 2 sets, you're not fatigued. Like, what? I think it's that.
Yeah, I did it. You're tired.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't know the difference between pain, discomfort, and being injured as well. So it does come down to education.
Yeah, we can get into the injury.
That lies in the process.
Why is that so much harder?
Athlete that comes on board, especially if they're like a new athlete, throughout their journey, they're going to get like pains and stuff like that. And differentiating between essentially what good pain is and what bad pain is a learning curve for them. And obviously, as we discussed earlier, you've got rugby players, and their understanding of pain is a little bit different.
Skewed dangerously so, where they're like, it's fine, it's like hanging off.
I think that okay. For like the mental health thing as well, though, it is a complete learning curve on how much you can actually withstand mentally before you go to the gym. But some people definitely need to be encouraged in that sense.
I'm going to wrap that on there because we said this would be short. Shut up, Ryan. No, you're out. Shut up. You're out of time. I'm sure it was gold nuggets. You don't get to say it. We're stopping that one there. And also, your audio sucks.